Okay, so thanks for allowing me to be a part of this adventure. I proposed this talk to Yanir because I've been increasingly frustrated that we seem to be sliding backwards. Um, I'm pretty confident that if the SARS-2 pandemic were to occur today, we would be worse off than when we were in March of 2020. And it saddens me. It really makes me question our society that we seem to be unable to learn on many topics, but on specifically this topic in particular. So I'm going to use this 5 minutes to kind of frame the discussion coming up and how we kind of got to this point. Um, so this isn't our first pandemic. The big one that happened in 1918 has been multiply described as the forgotten pandemic. There are no memorials to the 1918 pandemic. We talk in our social studies classes um, about the First World War all the time, Second World War all the time, whereas the 1918 pandemic killed more people and set us up for learning for future events, but we never bothered to go through those learnings. So since then, we've had a number of other quote unquote practice pandemics. The one that I really want to draw attention to is the SARS event of 2003, which impacted my country quite immensely. Granted, it was one city, it was Toronto, but it was really transformational for us because it really made us question a lot of the foundations of occupational health and safety, as well as patient protection in hospitals. And so we actually had two really good um, uh, inquiries that came out of that. One at the national level, which ended up creating our Public Health Agency of Canada, and one at the provincial level called the Campbell Report. And I would propose that had we followed the guidance of that Ontario SARS inquiry, we would have had much less death, much less morbidity, much less impact on society, because the two key things that came out of this 1,200-page report is number one, the precautionary principle. If you don't know something, just uh, have the presumption of going to the worst case scenario and then adjust as you move along, rather than the other way. Just presume that it's the best case scenario and then make things more stringent as you learn more. So the backwards to what we did in March of 2020. And then the second thing is presume any future pandemics are based on airborne transmission and have that presumption at the beginning as well. Two things that we completely threw out. So then we went through SARS-CoV-2, and we're going through this retrospective look at the moment. Now, there are two inquiries that have happened in the Western world that I want to draw attention to as being very positive. The big one right now is the UK COVID inquiry. I'm hearing the testimony that's coming out of that as being very robust. It's being guided by judges and lawyers, and I think that has made a huge difference rather than having the medical community guide this. And they're holding the medical community's feet to the fire and to account. And airborne has been central to that. Long COVID has been central to that. The Australian inquiry, that's the green one up top. Again, pretty robust, I would say, based in facts, although no mention of airborne whatsoever. And we'll get into why I think that's a real tragedy in a lot of these retrospectives going forward. Here in North America, it's been more challenging. I think the Americans would agree that this COVID select committee on oversight by the government that came out 2 years ago um, was really not robust. It was very politically biased. They had agendas that they brought forward. If you look at the news stories regarding this, it's almost
30 seconds.
exclusively about the origin of the virus. Although when you go into the report itself, there's a lot about saying masks don't work, mask mandates are horrible. It's really not anything to base future pandemic planning on. And then, of course, just in the last year, this book came out, basically saying that, look at how few deaths there were in that first year. We shouldn't have done any of the protections that were instilled at that time. Of course, that's a counterfactual that can never be proven, but I think we all know that if we had allowed that to rip, our societies would have been torn asunder. So that brings us to today. And finally, in Canada, we've been calling for a COVID inquiry for years. This is a paper co-authored by myself and some esteemed colleagues, and no hint of that coming. Just I put the little crickets photo up there to show what's really happening in Canada at the moment. So at some point, maybe we can talk about why we haven't been able to look back, but I think it's important that we know that we haven't effectively done that. And so that brings us to the talk that we're going to have this morning, which is talking about the big one,